Are you a professional who has to lead video conferencing meetings and you know they could be significantly better? Well, then you're going to get a lot out of today's episode because today we're bringing on an expert right from Zoom Communications. His name is Derek Pando, and he is going to reveal the secrets for how to lead highly productive video conferencing meetings.
Are you a professional who wants to become a more effective leader? Then get ready for daily tips from the coach with the experience and inspiration to help you succeed in any leadership situation. You're listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast with Gordon Shepherd.
Welcome to another episode of the Meeting Leadership Podcast. My name is Gordon Shepherd, and I just want to say whether you're on the treadmill, maybe you're out in the car, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on the show to get another tip, another strategy to build your leadership skills and learn how to run highly effective meetings. It is great to have you here. And today on the show, we're going to talk about a really important topic, especially when it comes to getting more done these days in meetings. Because today, we're going to talk about how to lead highly productive video conferencing meetings. And fortunately, we've got Derek Pando back on the show to help us do just that. Now, for many of you, you might have already listened to episode 102 on the Meeting Leadership Podcast. It was called How Zoom Video Conferencing Software Makes Meetings Better. And Derek there shared his real insights from his position as the lead for partner and international marketing at Zoom Video Communications. And if you'd like to listen to that episode, just go to meetingleadershipinc.com/102. And because I know that for so many of you, you're just looking to get an edge when it comes to video conferencing meetings, I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Here's the insightful interview with Derek Pando. Derek, welcome back to the show. You knocked it out of the park in episode 102 when we found out all the great things that are happening with Zoom video conferencing software. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Gordon. It's great to be back and excited to keep the discussion going.
Well, good. And for a few people that may not have met you just yet, how do you introduce yourself?
I usually introduce myself as a guy that leads international partner marketing here at Zoom. Beyond that, also a part-time gardener and father are kind of probably the two other things that take up the most time in my life. But Zoom is my primary day job.
I'm glad you dropped the gardening thing because in your bio, I'm literally going to read this. If you've got a lot of time to kill, ask him about his vegetable garden. So what happened this year? I've just got to ask.
So this year I had a bumper crop of Roma tomatoes. I had some problems with some pests eating my green peppers, but yeah, I experimented with some new stuff this year. But the big news on the gardening front is I live in the Bay Area in California, so we can do what's called a winter garden, which is not possible, probably where you are.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, not up north here for sure.
For the first time, I planted vegetables that will be growing this winter. So I'm very excited about that.
Well, it sounds like you could be busy enough with your garden, but by the way, here you are involved in this whole Zoom rocket ship. I was hearing about your increase in employees and all that kind of thing. And luckily today, we're going to be able to talk to you about some of your experience as a leader in this topic, which is how to lead highly productive video conferencing meetings. And you were mentioning to me, I know in the other episode, and even before we got onto this one, that you lead teams around the world. So quite often throughout the day, you're actually in video conferencing meetings. What are your sort of top suggestions for other leaders when they're actually leading the meetings themselves?
Yeah, there's a few things that come to mind. A few of these are going to sound basic, but as we've talked to customers and potential customers across the world, we realize it's not as common as some of our more advanced users experience. But one of the first things is like every meeting that you have in your calendar should have a link to an invite for a video meeting. And that may sound strange because you're like, hey, Derek, well, my one-on-ones every week are in person. But what I would say is not always, right? And people are running late or people decide they're going to work from home. And you'd be surprised how many times people just end up getting left out of stuff because they didn't have the flexibility of, oh, I'm running late. I could just join on my way into the office or something like that. So one thing that we do here at Zoom and I do with my team is that even if it's a planned in-person meeting, I always have a meeting link in there. And Zoom makes it easy within calendar integration, so it doesn't take a lot of work to do that. It's just clicking a button, as well as many of our competitors do the same. So that'd be kind of the first thing I would say.
I like what you're going with that. And I can tell you, working with boards of directors, when I hear that someone can't be at a board meeting, and suddenly this affects something like getting quorum to have a vote, but in the meantime, they could have simply done exactly what you're just talking about, this could have a really major impact on making sure that people are getting together when they're supposed to.
Yes, exactly. And it's also giving people the flexibility to do what they got to do, especially if you're in a place where you have a long commute. It's like, well, if I can take a meeting during my commute, that's better for the company. And that's actually better for me too. Flexibility is key, I think, and having those links in there ready to go if needed, enable that.
Makes sense. And you were going to say, what's your next point?
There's so many cues that you miss if it's just an audio conversation, right? So if you can encourage everyone to have their video on, and then also when you are participating in the meeting, you are looking at people and watching for cues. Like, has it been a while since Joe said anything? Like, does Cindy look bored? Does she look stressed? Is there something else going on in her life that's maybe going to make it so she's not going to be able to give her all in this moment for this meeting? Are important things that if you were doing it in person, you'd probably more naturally pay attention to. But with video, you just need to make a little bit more of a concerted effort, but you could still adapt and adjust the meeting so that it's more effective for everybody if you're paying attention.
Well, and this makes sense. There's those disasters where you hear, like on an audio call, the toilet flush or the dog bark or this kind of stuff, but at least the video makes people a bit honest.
It does, right? You can see if they're doing something else or multitasking. Yeah, totally. The other thing I would say, and this is something that I didn't really experience a ton until I started working at Zoom, was the ability to bring other people into the meeting quickly that you need to be there. So like, let's say, Gordon, you and I are having a meeting about something and all of a sudden we're like, oh, really? It's Katrina has all these answers. Instead of being like, oh, let's schedule a meeting with the three of us, blah, blah, blah. You say, well, let's call her over Zoom right now. And so from the meeting, you ping her and see if she can join. Sometimes she can, sometimes she can't. But when it comes to the speed of operating, not waiting to schedule a meeting, but seeing if you can address whatever the issue is right now by pulling in one or many people into the discussion is much more effective than kicking the can down the road.
Well, I really appreciate what you're saying there, because Zoom, of course, deals with some of the biggest brands with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of employees. And one of the fatigues that I hear, being a meeting expert to help people get better at it, is travel time in between meetings. And so what you're saying is you're giving them instant access and you're letting them be more efficient.
Yes, exactly. Right. And then I also think the element of there's probably a lot of times people don't need to be in some of these reoccurring meetings, but you want to have the flexibility to call them in if needed. Right. And before it was too much of a hassle. It's like, oh, I got to send this email and oh, what if they don't have it, blah, blah, blah. We've tried to take a lot of that friction out of being able to bring people in. And so they can be more in the right meetings, which means less meetings overall, which we are happy with.
Well, and I'll tell you, I speak at conferences as well. And one of the things I can say honestly is I actually have a little exercise that I do. I say, put your hand up in the air if you're in at least one meeting per week. Of course, all the hands go up with the professionals that I'm training, whether it's engineers, doctors, or whatever. People in the medical area, they keep their hand up, and then I say, keep your hand up if you're in at least 2 meetings per week, 3 meetings per week, 4. Usually the higher level executives, they drop off at about 14. I had a woman in one of these moments where she had her hand up at 30. The whole room gasped. They were like, oh my goodness. And what I can tell you now from firsthand experience is you look at any downtown anywhere, all those office towers, we are burning out our best people by sending them to too many daytime meetings. The reality is then what's happening? They do their regular work at night. It's affecting their families. It's affecting their relationships, their ability. When they have to do their regular work, they have to do that at night as well. So suddenly you've got your best person. You're paying them the most money, but you're actually burning them out with these meetings. What you've just said to me, which I hear a lot back from executives, is they say, if I could just be there for the minutes that I'm needed, and you've just offered a solution to that, I can tell you that is a massive, massive need.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nobody wants to be in meetings so much that they have to do all their work outside of business hours. That is not a long-term recipe for success.
No, it's having a massive corporate impact. So again, as I sort of pull things together and people come to me and they're like, well, what can I do? I'm always practical. And so what you've just given me again is sort of another arrow in my kit is this idea of saying, wait a second, what if you were on a sort of seamless video conferencing software, and if you had your phone or some sort of way to hook up, you'd be able to sort of jump on for what's needed and be able to do that. And that often is just all they need for permission to introduce the concept.
Yeah, totally agree.
Well, thank you for those great suggestions. I know that people listening to this are always looking for ways to improve their meetings. Talking to someone who's literally soaked in the software, doing online meetings all day long, those are great suggestions. Derek, if people need to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Probably the easiest way is to hit me up on Twitter. My handle is at DJ Pando, which I'm not a DJ. My middle name is Jay, and still regretting the handle 10 years later after creating it. But yeah, always happy to answer questions, and people send me a message on LinkedIn. And is there any way I can help? Please reach out.
Thank you so much. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. It was great to have you again on the show.
Thanks, Gordon. It was great to be here.
Now, there were so many great suggestions in that interview, but the one that struck me was, if you want to make the most of your senior leaders' time, of those people that really shouldn't be wasting 2 and 3 hours in a meeting, why don't you just use something like Zoom to bring them in and get them there when they need to be there, and then allow them to get back to their other work and help them to be as productive as possible overall. And if you're looking for even more great insights from Derek, check out episode 102 on the Meeting Leadership Podcast. It's called How Zoom Video Conferencing Software Makes Meetings Better. And you can get that one by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/102. And we are also lucky enough to get some inspiration from Derek on episode 116 on the Meeting Leadership Podcast. This is one of those episodes where he shares an inspiring leadership story, in this case about a lot of the bright young people that he is actually getting inspired by that he works with every day at Zoom. And you can listen to that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/116. And I also want to let you know that this episode of the Meeting Leadership Podcast is brought to you by the Meeting Leadership Academy. Now there, for you and your team, you're going to find some terrific options for online training and live training that will help you not only get inspired, but get the practical things that you need to really take your meetings up a notch, to really improve their productivity, make them better overall, and ultimately help to grow your organization and serve your customers and your end users and clients at the highest possible level. And if you'd like to learn more about those opportunities, then visit meetingleadershipinc.com/academy. And if you haven't done it yet, please hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast app and send in a rating and review. It will help us program even better content for you in the future on the podcast. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more strategies to help you become an outstanding leader. And don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you fresh content every day. We'll see you tomorrow, right here on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
I'm on top of the world, now I'm living. And the good just gets better, keeps on giving. Not even close to the end, it's just beginning. Life is getting